Hello everyone. What if you decided to stop eating sugar for 30 days? And when I say sugar, I mean anything that tastes sweet and contains calories. This includes regular sugar, honey, agave syrup, high fructose corn syrup, and many others. All of these are classified as disaccharides, meaning two molecules are bonded together, forming a simple structure that the body absorbs very quickly. Although glucose and fructose differ in how they bond and are processed by the body, both affect the body in very similar ways. For example, glucose raises blood sugar levels quickly, triggering the release of insulin. Over time, this can lead to insulin resistance. On the other hand, fructose, which is metabolized in the liver, impairs liver function and contributes to insulin resistance as well. Now, it's also important to recognize another type of sugar that deserves attention: polysaccharides, better known as starches. These are found in foods like bread, potatoes, corn, and others. While these foods don't contain fructose, they are made up of long chains of glucose molecules. When you consume them, these starches break down quickly, turning into glucose and raising blood sugar levels, just like refined sugars. So, let's dive into what you might notice in the short and medium term if you decide to cut out sugar from your diet. In the first few days, you may feel some challenges, especially since your body is used to sugar and carbs as a primary source of fuel. When you cut them out, your body doesn't immediately know where to get energy from. This might cause discomfort as you're breaking a sugar dependency cycle. What happens is that when you regularly consume carbohydrates, your blood sugar rises, and insulin is released to manage those levels. However, over time, this constant fluctuation can lead to blood sugar roller coasters, leaving you with energy spikes followed by crashes, triggering cravings for more sugar. But once you eliminate that cycle, your body begins to adjust and learn to derive energy from other sources. It doesn't take too long. Within just a few days, you'll start noticing that your body is getting better at burning fat for energy. This process can be tough in the first few days, so persistence is key. Additionally, you may experience withdrawal symptoms because sugar and carbs are addictive. They activate the brain's reward system, releasing dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and satisfaction. That's why we feel such strong cravings for sweet foods. They trigger that reward system and provide a temporary burst of pleasure. But once you become accustomed to life without sugar, it turns into a psychological addiction, something your body starts to miss. This process is similar to addiction to substances like cocaine or heroin, where the brain needs more to achieve the same level of pleasure. As Wayne Dyer used to say, addiction is when you don't get tired of something you don't want. And this fits perfectly when we think about sugar. Even though we know it's not good for us, we often continue to indulge, feeding into the addiction. Dopamine, which is essential for our motivation and goals, when manipulated by addictive substances, can create a much stronger response than it would from natural sources. Sugar, when consumed excessively, has a much stronger effect than the small amounts found in natural foods like fruits and vegetables. This creates a vicious cycle that's hard to break. You might be wondering why some people can consume sugar or alcohol without becoming addicted. This happens because each person's brain is wired differently, which determines how susceptible they are to addiction. The lower centers of the brain, which are responsible for primitive needs like pleasure and survival, can respond differently to addictive substances compared to the higher brain centers, which control motivation and executive function. This makes the impact of sugar, for example, stronger for some individuals than for others. The important thing to understand is that, over time, excessive sugar consumption alters neural pathways, trapping us in this reward cycle. Without proper control, these pathways become even harder to reverse. The higher brain centers, particularly the frontal lobe, are better able to manage and regulate volume based on the needs of other areas. The good news is that there is something called neuroplasticity, meaning the brain can change on its own, and the strongest driver of this change is exercise. That's why I talk so much about the benefits of exercise. It affects nearly everything. We also need to understand something called BDNF, which stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Don't worry about the name. All you need to know is that it's like a growth miracle for the brain. It makes things happen. It helps the brain repair itself, improve connections, and better organize itself. This BDNF helps protect the brain against shrinkage. So when we have these substances, neurons can degenerate and shrink due to constant stimulation, but BDNF acts as a shield, protecting against this process. In other words, exercise reduces the likelihood of becoming addicted to substances like sugar. On the other hand, sugar does the opposite. It actually reduces the production of BDNF, halting that miraculous brain growth. The two powerful factors that stimulate the production of BDNF are exercise and fasting. In other words, reducing sugar intake while increasing exercise boosts BDNF production, making you more resilient to addiction and the effects of these substances. I find it unfortunate that every time we hear about exercise, it's often reduced to just calorie burning or trying to look a certain way after indulging in a cake. If you look at the benefits of high-impact training, you'll realize it's so much more than burning calories. It's essential to understand these effects to see why breaking an addictive habit can be tough. But once you push through the initial phase, it gets much easier. After just a few days, you'll begin to notice fewer cravings. Your blood sugar levels will stabilize, and your body will start adapting to using fat for energy, resulting in less hunger. Even after only a few days, you'll notice you're not as hungry, partially because your blood sugar is more stable. With stable blood sugar, you won't experience the usual fluctuations. Additionally, as your insulin levels begin to drop, your body can access stored fat for energy. This means fat burning is happening, which, of course, leads to weight loss. That's one of the main reasons people try cutting sugar. When we look at the brain, we see improvements as well. Most people will notice an uplift in their mood. They feel less anxious and depressed, and experience improved mental clarity and better focus. They get more done, and these changes happen due to stabilized blood sugar. Why? Because the brain tightly regulates blood sugar levels. It prefers to keep it around 100, as too high or too low blood sugar levels can be dangerous. Most of the time, the brain relies on glucose as fuel, but if you become insulin resistant, the brain can't get all the energy it needs from glucose. That's when the body switches to burning fat and starches. Now, you're on a very low-carb diet and producing ketones, which serve as an alternative fuel source for the brain. So if your brain can't get enough energy from glucose, it now has an extra fuel source. And it's not just your brain that gets more energy, your whole body does. You'll notice that with stable blood sugar and sufficient fat, your body begins to repair its metabolism, reducing the reliance on insulin and increasing fat-burning enzymes. That means your body will produce energy in a much more stable way. Another fascinating change is that your taste buds will change, or more precisely, the receptors for your taste buds will adapt. You'll reprogram your brain to perceive food differently, which can be a great experience. You'll gain a whole new appreciation for real food, and you may notice that healthy foods taste amazing and that you discover flavors you hadn't noticed before because your senses were dulled by fast food and sugar. I hear it all the time. People who have been off sugar for a few weeks or months and then, when a birthday comes around, they eat cake and what do they think? They find it way too sweet. They realize how overly sweetened foods actually are once their body has reset. Even if you don't enjoy certain things anymore, and I know some people feel the same way, they waited months for this and now they come back and, even worse, they eat this cake again. And what happens? Now they're feeling nauseous because their body knows better. If you're the first to succeed in cutting sugar for 30 days, don't stop now. You've created a healthier lifestyle, but if you choose to manage it, the results are there. Blood tests are where you can find concrete evidence of your improved health. Even if you no longer enjoy certain things, and I know this happens to many people, Maybe you waited months for this moment, only for it to come back, and now, even worse, you find yourself eating that cake again. What happens? You end up feeling nauseous because your body knows better. But if you're the first to succeed in cutting out sugar for 30 days, don't stop now. You've created a new and healthier lifestyle, but if you choose to manage it well, the results are already in motion. Blood tests are where you can find objective evidence of your improved health. You'll likely discover that your blood sugar levels have dropped significantly, your A1C, which is the 3-month average glucose, has reduced, and your triglycerides, the fats in your blood, have decreased. Even if you eat much more fat, your triglycerides will still decrease because they come from sugar. You'll also notice improvements in your cholesterol levels. Not necessarily lower totals, but you'll find that your HDL, the good cholesterol, is likely higher, and the ratio between your total cholesterol and HDL has decreased. This is one of the most important indicators when it comes to heart disease risk. Additionally, if you get a more specialized cholesterol profile, the number of small LDL particles will likely decrease as well. Even if total LDL remains the same, the ratio of small, damaged, oxidized LDL to total LDL will significantly drop. All of these signs together indicate you are heading in the right direction, meaning your inflammation levels are dropping. Your blood pressure is probably lower too. But the most important thing is the deep and lasting impact you are having on your future health. In just 30 days without sugar, you can completely change your future health outlook. Of course, you can't just stop after 30 days and go back to eating junk food. You have to continue. You need to keep going, and the first step is burning off some of that liver fat. When you stop feeding your liver with fructose, it will begin to burn fat and reduce liver fat. If you're looking to reduce your risk of type 2 diabetes, you can do so quickly by cutting sugar. By doing so, you'll also lower your risk of kidney failure, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and even dementia. You'll also decrease your risk of cancer and improve your immune system function. Now, I hope the next piece grabs your attention, because we're all very familiar with something called COVID-19, that pesky little virus. But what most people don't realize is that this virus tends to kill some people and save others. So, what's the difference? The biggest difference is everything we've discussed so far: metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and low-grade inflammation. Early on in the epidemic, they discovered that people with metabolic syndrome and several other risk factors had a mortality rate of about 15%. Meanwhile, people without these factors had a mortality rate of 0.1% or less. That's why cutting out sugar could improve your odds by a staggering 100 to 150 times. Let's take a deeper look at how these factors affect your brain and how they may influence your experience with COVID-19. When the epidemic hit, we were all told to stay at home. So, staying home meant we didn't get to interact socially in our normal way. We weren't going to work, we weren't receiving the usual mental stimulation, and we were worrying about work and COVID-19. This lack of normal social interactions, and the stress from worrying, led to more anxiety and depression. Before the pandemic, about 17% of the population in the US had some level of anxiety or depression. By the later stages of the pandemic, that number had jumped to 40%. Nearly half of the population was dealing with anxiety or depression as a result of the changes. When we feel bad, we naturally seek ways to feel better, and the easiest option is sugar. So, when we're stressed, anxious, or depressed, we often turn to comfort foods, and most of those foods are packed with sugar or starch. And then, when we're told to stay at home and can't even go to the beach or parks, we stop moving. Being so depressed, we lose our motivation and we don't exercise. When we stop moving, our brain doesn't get the stimulation it needs to create new synapses and boost BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Without that stimulation, the brain becomes weaker. And as the brain gets weaker, we lose the ability to control stress, and it starts to spiral out of control. This increase in stress further weakens our immune system, and when we eat more sugar, it only exacerbates the problem. The sugar weakens our immunity, which is exactly what we need to fight off viruses. I don't want to paint a bleak or depressing picture here, though. What we need to understand is that we can take control of this, but first, we have to understand how these processes work so we can set goals and stay motivated to cut out sugar, start moving, and turn things around. I truly hope you're ready to commit to cutting sugar for the next 30 days. But if you need an additional reason, let's talk about money, because that tends to grab attention. A lot of people invest a significant amount of their money in something called Medicare. There are two types of health insurance. One with an I insurance, where you pay a lot each month for coverage, but it only treats symptoms when you're sick. The second type is Medicare with an E, which involves taking action to stay healthy and even reverse the diseases you already have. If you spend a little extra money on real food, you'll get much better health coverage, and that's what really matters. In my practice, we don't accept any health insurance with an I because it doesn't actually pay for the real health coverage, Medicare with an E. If you liked this video, you'll love this one. And if you really want to take control of your health and understand how your body truly works, be sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a life-changing video. Thank you for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure to follow and share it with your friends. Together, we can all make better health choices and improve our lives. Stay strong, stay healthy, and take action now. Your future self will thank you.